The next on-page SEO element that I wanted to speak to you guys about is the URL structure. The URL structure, as you guys probably already know, is the website link or the address that you reach to get to the site. As you can see here, you can see moz.com/blog/15 SEO best practices. Now this is separated by hyphens. You can separate by underscores if you want, but hyphens is kind of a common practice. Now, this is really important as it relates to SEO because, again, this is on-page SEO. So this is what's within your reach or within your control. On your website, you have total control of this. For example, if you're using a system like WordPress, you could set the permalinks to the post name. So it will use the post name and it will separate it out with hyphens and will remove some of the extraneous words that are unnecessary. So here, what we have to keep in mind is that whenever we're creating URL structures, we want to be able to ensure that it's readable by humans. So the more readable it is, the better. So what do we mean by that? For example, let's take a look at this link. You see here it says elitelife.com/luxury-rentals/North-America/Caribbean/Turks and Caicos with hyphens separated, etc. You get the picture. So this is a very readable URL structure. And as you can see in this URL structure, there's no page name, there's no PHP, ASP, or anything like that. It's just a simple and readable URL structure that leads to a page that makes sense. So what we want to do is ensure that we have a very, very readable URL name. So instead of having something like this, as you can see, like post $ID = 77 and KW = puppies plus confused. Now that's a little bit more confusing, and plus what you have here are the variables after the page name, which variables for Google doesn't really like variables. It won't read past the first variable. So it's better to stay away from variables. Now this is really, really bad. If you see down here, the one that's in red, this is a really, really confusing URL. Now this would be really difficult for anybody to read, let alone Google, anybody. So you want to keep it really, really simple. If you see here on Copyblogger, this is a really popular website as well. You can see that it says /type/seminars. You can click on any of these and pretty much you'll see how the basic URL structure is. Now, Google does want you to keep these URLs simple. It doesn't want you to have too many forward slashes because it doesn't want people to get confusing. Now, in this case, this is a little bit different because this relates to properties in certain areas, and the way that this is structured makes more sense that way. But if we go to any of the articles on, say, Copyblogger, we can see it's pretty simple. They have very, very simple, straightforward, and basic URLs. Copyblogger.com/write-the-answer. So that's their URL and relates to the title of the article, and it's pretty much incorporating their keyword into the article itself. So that's what you want to do, and you want to keep the keyword in the URL. You don't want to avoid having the keyword in the URL. Now, you might want to have an LSI keyword in the URL, but I would go with the exact match keyword in the URL because that's going to send a very, very strong relevancy signal. Now, there's also an important thing to keep in mind is in the URL itself, where does the keyword start? Does the keyword start at the beginning of the URL? Does it start at the end of the URL? You want to start, for best practice, you want to start the keyword at the beginning of the URL because that will send the strongest relevancy signal. Now, there are lots of other variables when they're associated with URLs. Now, we'll cover some of these. Some of these might not relate to you. For example, doing canonical URLs to avoid having duplicate content logged by Google. Here you'll see what I just mentioned about avoiding dynamic parameters because Google doesn't really read past it. So it has no idea of what that means, and it wants it to be much more legible and understandable by everybody. So you also want to keep the URL short. You don't want to have it too long. The page name itself shouldn't be too long. If you can avoid that, then that's great. As you can see, you want to match the URLs to the titles most of the time when it makes sense. And they provide an example here that you can see with randswhiskey.com. And there are a number of other factors that you want to consider. You don't want to put the stop words in. Now, if you're using WordPress post names, for example, as the permalink, then they'll exclude those anyways for the most part, and or but of the a, etc. You don't want to have those in there. You want to have these punctuation characters because it could throw off search engines and browsers by breaking them. For example, they might not be able to read what it says. So you want to stick with the normal characters and not use abnormal characters in the URL. As you can see here, it says fewer folders is generally better. You want to avoid hashtags. So in effect, this is your on-page, SEO that you're going to be able to have some wheeled over. Now, the really important thing again is to keep that keyword in the URL. And in a system like WordPress, this is really easy because the keyword is going to be used to create the URL itself anyhow. So these are just the best practices. You want to keep these in mind when you're doing that. Now, if you have a custom website, you're not using WordPress or something like that, then come up with a nomenclature and a structure for your URL that makes sense. And you'll want to use the htaccess file to be able to structure page names into URLs that are easily readable. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit later. That's a little bit more advanced stuff, but I'm going to cover it anyways because I think that it's useful information for you to have. So for now, just keep these basics in mind when you're structuring a URL of your page.